Hi everyone, Blake here with a special announcement before we get into the episode. We're doing a viewer's choice movie special for our second episode later in November. If you have a pre 2000s movie you love, or an old movie you've never seen before but would be interested in hearing more about, let us know. You can reach us on our Facebook page, our Twitter page, our Podbean channel, or our YouTube channel. Just look for Vintage Cinema Rewind, basically anywhere you can find a podcast. I'm really excited to hear what you come up with. Alright, now back to the show. Welcome to VCR, a Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
I'm Jason.
And we're back for the Halloween special.
Yeah, super pumped.
Yeah.
Great time of the year.
My favorite time of the year. My favorite time of the year for movies. I watch a lot of movies in October.
Yeah. You have like that whole box set to go through.
Yeah. I should mention that actually. That I found at Walmart this 10 horror movie box set. I'm about halfway through it now. I would say we've
lots
watched
of good classics on there.
Yeah, lots of good classics. Some maybe interesting choices on a few of them. Like they picked Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but like the 2003 reboot and not the original. A couple of those that is like, all right, whatever. But it's still like, it still came with like The Shining and The Conjuring, The Lost Boys, which I'd never seen before. And I guess you hadn't even heard of. I really enjoyed it. Cool 80s vibe to it.
Nice.
And
so we kind of went like somewhere out of the way with this one. It's not super well known, but it's fitting for this time of year. It's a little creepy.
Yeah, we've got the 1997 Canadian film Cube. And I think you've got the plot summary ready to go for it.
Yeah. So it's an all-Canadian cast, but not really a Canadian theme to it. It just happens to be Canadian produced and everything. So 6 people wake up in different cube-shaped rooms. Each has 6 exits, but they soon find as they open up certain exits that some of the cubes are booby-trapped. They find that the traps are not the only thing they have to worry about.
Yeah, the theme of 6 here is very relevant throughout the movie, which is obvious when you're dealing with a cube. It's probably obvious to kind of connect those.
And then like there's like 666 is one of the numbers that happens to be involved. So they went a pretty cool way with having the math element in this. So,
yeah, basically the characters have to come together to solve like how they're going to get out of this cube shaped labyrinth essentially. And there's a lot of math involved in how they're going to escape and everything, and different kind of calculations that they have to work out to solve this puzzle.
Yeah, and it's not super obvious. So each of the characters kind of going into plot, but each of the character description, each of the characters kind of has a different skill set, and they just find that out because they're all trapped here. And like one of them is a doctor who is like, we only have like so much time before we're so exhausted and dehydrated that we can't function anymore.
Yeah, because that's another interesting thing going into the film is that maybe in other films of this similar genre, the characters are given opportunities to find water or food one way or another, and in this, it's really in this like I don't even know, like corporate kind of cubicle. Not cubicle, but like cube-shaped rooms. There's nothing there. Like it's very industrial. That's the word I'm looking for. And there's no food or water ever presented. So we're really on like a very short timeline for these characters to escape.
And this movie gets started quick.
Yes, it hits the ground running, and I really, really loved how this film picks up and kind of really tosses you into everything quickly, and things move at a very brisk pace for the first half, at least, I would say. So let's talk characters and people you may know, because you started to allude to some of the characters and their specialties. I kind of want to start with Quentin, the cop. He kind of takes the lead on the situation. He's kind of our first character to kind of like maybe latch onto as maybe one of the protagonists of the film, or main protagonist of the film.
He's trying to have everyone think about what they have to live for, and he's like, just think about that and we have to keep going. Like,
just keeping everybody motivated and everybody connected as a team, looking for like the strengths of each person to try to figure out how they can as a team get through this together and analyze the scenario. And that's actually one thing that I quite enjoyed about the film, is that the characters themselves, I wouldn't say are ever stupid. Like, everybody makes interesting, like, well thought out decisions in terms of like how to escape or how to work together and stuff like that. That's sometimes something that in horror movies can be like a little bit more contrived, right?
Like there's not that whole like, no, don't go in there, like the audience is yelling at the characters and then they're like, oh, wonder what's in here. Like,
yeah, exactly.
They're very aware of their situation, and it's kind of like somewhat realistic about how like 6 people might react differently to this absurd, crazy, scary situation.
Yeah, and so as we talk about each of the actors, too, I've got a few actors that have some interesting connections here. A lot of them have connections to TV shows, and specifically TV shows in the same sort of genre, like the sci-fi, maybe even horror elements in the TV shows that they're related to. So Quentin is played by Maurice Dean Wint, who plays August Ripley on the Sci-Fi Channel show Surreal Estate, which I'd seen advertisements for, but I haven't seen myself. It's currently on the Sci-Fi Channel, though, so if you've been paying attention to that, you might have seen him on there.
He has a very long acting history. Like, he has 101 acting credits.
Yeah, he's appeared in a lot of smaller roles, I would say. Like, I didn't see a lot of roles that I knew him from. He does look very familiar, and like his acting is actually really good. Like, that is one thing that I'll say. For the most part, like for a small Canadian production, these actors portray the characters really well.
Yeah, he was in Suits for I think one episode.
Yes, he was in Suits for one episode. Like, it's hard for me to like bring up like the one-off episodes kind of thing, because it's like,
it's not where you would really know him.
Yeah, exactly. So I look for, when I'm trying to prepare for this, like the more depth in their roles, basically.
Yeah.
The next character I want to talk about is Levin, who plays a gifted math, or who is a gifted math student. And the group really relies on Levin to kind of help them navigate the rooms as they kind of start to decode
the puzzle.
Yeah, the puzzle around them. So Levin is played by Nicole DeBoer, who is an actor who was a series regular on the Dead Zone TV series. She played Sarah Bracknell Bannerman. That's actually a Stephen King novel that was adapted into a TV series in the early 2000s. It has a pretty good rating, too. I haven't checked it out, but it's on my list, actually, to watch at some point. Anyway, the next character is Worth, who is an office worker with maybe a little bit more of a colored past than we're initially given. He's played by David Hewlett. David Hewlett was actually in some larger movies. The Shape of Water, he played Fleming, which I haven't seen that one yet. I am a Guillermo del Toro fan.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. That's kind of like on the Guillermo list.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You definitely watch that if you're going through all of his stuff, but yeah.
He's in Rise of the Planet of the Apes as Hunsicker. The new Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I really enjoyed. I haven't actually finished yet, but I'm a big Planet of the Apes fan. I'm a big sci-fi fan in general.
I loved all the old ones, and like the new ones are fun. Like they're pretty good. They're well done.
Yeah, exactly. They're debatably more well done than most of the original films.
Yeah, but like given the time difference, like, but they could have just butchered them, and they didn't.
Yeah,
so
they did a very interesting take on those. Anyway, so he also played in Stargate Atlantis. He was Dr. Rodney McKay, another series regular on that, which is another popular TV sci-fi show. And Tormata in C. So he's actually a series regular on the Apple TV show C.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that. Okay.
So a relatively large actor that he became. Actually, we should probably talk about Worth, the character, a little bit more, because Worth is definitely the pessimist of the group. He doesn't have a whole lot of hope left in him, even like leading up to them waking up in the situation of the cube. And
he woke up with an injury. We're introduced to him with an injury, and then he kind of stays like down and phased out, or dazed, I guess.
Yeah, and he's cagey, and he just doesn't see a point or a reason to even bothering.
Yeah. Like, he's not offering too much insight or anything.
No.
He just has nothing left.
Yeah.
And so him and Quentin kind of go head to head a little bit, just because they're on opposite sides of that spectrum, the pessimism and optimism spectrum. Yeah. He's like Quentin's like, think about what you have outside that will make it worth continuing in here and fighting. And he's like, what would I fight for?
Yeah, he just doesn't seem to really care. The last character that I'm going to talk about the actor with is the character of Ren, who, as we find out very quickly, is an escape artist, having escaped 7 prisons in the past. A very intriguing character. I was really excited to see this character on screen, and excited to see where this character went in the film. He's actually plays Mike Hammer in The Red Green Show. I don't know if you watched that show. Yeah, I watched that show all the time.
I wouldn't remember the guy, and like I'd have to look at him again. Yeah, I missed that. That's funny.
It was really funny because I was like, I know this actor, and that was actually the performance that I knew him from. Rounding out our group of 6 is Holloway, who plays the Doctor, as you mentioned before. And Kazan, who is the final character that we meet, who he's mentally disabled, but we learn pretty quickly has some significant
mental capabilities.
Yeah, that help the group further through the cube. The director of the film is Vincenzo Natali, who kind of after this does a few other interesting films in the genre. Most recently did In the Tall Grass, which is the Stephen King adaptation on Netflix, which I enjoyed. It's a pretty decent movie. It's not like the worst Stephen King adaptation, not the best one I've ever seen. It's based on a short story, so kind of plays out like in a similar like hour and a half kind of film like this does.
Okay, yeah.
And then he also directed several episodes of shows that I've recently watched, like the new version of The Stand TV miniseries, which was bad. He directed a few episodes of Lock and Key, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard is really good.
It is. There's issues with it, but it's overall great. It's a great concept and fairly well done.
Yeah, he directed a few episodes of Westworld, which I love seasons 1 and season 2 of, The Strain, and rounding out that list, Hannibal. So pretty well-known, profound TV director. Also did the movies Splice and Cypher, which have mixed reviews. I think Cypher was the better one of the two of those, but both actually pretty mainstream movies with a mainstream cast to them. So if you're a fan of like genre horror, I think his movie category, or even if you're become a fan of this movie, there might be something more to dive into with his filmography.
Awesome. Nice.
So who is this movie for? I think there's a really interesting audience for this movie. I almost want to say that it's in like a subgenre of horror, which is like escape the situation or like escape.
That's almost
like escape
all
room horror almost.
Yeah. And I think it's more. I don't think it is just a subgenre. Like it is in a certain way because it's not like supremely horror focused.
Yeah,
horror is an aspect of this, but it's not exactly like the central thing. It's tough. It's in its like little niche, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's got that niche, and the people who are going to like it, I'm going to name out some kind of movies that have come out since, and some of them fairly recently. And if you're interested in any of these movies, I think there's something here that you're going to like about this one. The main one I'm going to actually mention that you and I both really enjoy is The Platform. Yeah. I think you can probably connect these two a little bit in terms of situation.
Yeah, quite a bit actually. That's a very, very good comparison.
Yeah.
But again, not many people have seen Platform, and they should.
Yeah, you and I have been talking about The Platform for a couple years now. Our buddy Kelvin, massive fan of The Platform. Yeah. And so I think he would actually really enjoy this movie as well because of its similarity in theme and plot and story
and the feel
exactly. There's also the movie Circle on Netflix. My cousin recommended it to me, and I watched it probably last year.
I think I remember seeing things about it.
Plays out very similar to The Platform. It's kind of like a social commentary a little bit, maybe not as in depth or not as much depth to it as The Platform, but it was still a pretty enjoyable situational horror kind of film. I think the Saw franchise isn't a huge leap from this, and I imagine there are aspects that the directors of the Saw franchise maybe even watched this film prior to coming up with the idea and incorporated aspects of it into that.
Yeah, because the traps are Saw-like.
Yeah.
But the rest, like, yeah, it's different in many ways, but there are commonalities.
Yeah, there's commonalities. There's enough commonalities between all of these that I think we can recommend it to the audience of those, and because of this film's history and its relative obscurity and how small of a cult following, but a cult following nonetheless, there is. I think the fans of that kind of subgenre are really going to latch onto this. I think if you're
the closest thing, like Squid Game is kind of it's similar.
It's similar in tone to Squid Game. Not as
don't expect as craziness, like as much craziness as Squid Game, because like there's so many people and so much action in that, where this is a little bit more of a slow burn, where like you're thinking throughout it a little bit. They try to get you there.
Yeah, to evoke that sense of kind of trying to figure out the puzzle along with the group kind of thing. Yeah. I think it's not a stretch to say if you're a fan of the Black Mirror series as well, this kind of plays out like a bit of an extended Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, and actually I think I did see that it was somewhat inspired by a certain Twilight Zone episode.
Yes, it was, which I will talk about later when we get to the sequels, prequels, and reboots.
Again, there's so many movies that it's comparable to, so if you like that kind of subgenre, I'll allow it now. Yeah. Then this could be for you.
Yeah, it's horror with a sci-fi alternative universe kind of twist to it. Mm-hmm. When to watch? So where I would put this is actually as maybe a double feature night. So you've watched one movie, and then this is kind of the second late night kind of film in your double feature.
I think I might put this first as like a warm-up to something that's a little more intense.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on how you want to go about your night, but yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing is I guess how you want to go about your night.
Yeah, like this one like leads up, I think, to something that might be like if you're to watch like a huge pinnacle type horror movie, this would like lead you up to that in like a fun way, and might get you thinking about what's going on in the next movie like a little deeper.
See, and that's where I was thinking, like, I actually maybe want, like, a scarier film to start, and then this one to kind of make me think a little bit more before I go to bed kind of thing.
Yeah. Either way. Yeah.
You and I seem to have our preference to how we want to watch our double feature night, but I think it's a pretty good one to slot in sometime around Halloween, around now.
Yeah, like if there's ever a Friday the 13th, well, maybe not that exactly, but, like, during October, like, a double feature night then would be pretty fun.
Yeah, exactly. Where to watch? It's not currently streaming anywhere, so you're going to have to maybe find it through alternative means.
Maybe find a DVD somewhere.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
A VHS, I'm sure it's on.
I did see somewhere that you can find a box set of the trilogy of Cube movies.
Yeah, that would be probably the easiest way and the most bang for your buck.
Yeah,
unless you're going to go illegal.
Yeah. And I think that's probably it for our spoiler-free section of the episode. I think.
Yeah, like this movie starts so quick that the spoilers are instant, basically.
Yeah, like I had a really hard time talking around a lot of things there, and it's almost a disservice to know some of the plot points that are going in, especially with your enjoyment of the film. So I think this is definitely one of those films where I would say, if you're at all interested in this and the idea of the cube, check it out before you listen to the rest of the episode.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think we're going to take a little bit of a different approach this time, and we're going to do a little bit more of a plot discussion of the movie, because I think you and I kind of talked before the podcast, and I think both have aspects of the film that we really enjoyed, and that maybe there's some pitfalls that you and I didn't enjoy as much. And so I kind of want to dissect those a little bit before we get into kind of the background. Like, let's do a little bit of a in front of the camera dive before we get behind the camera.
Yeah, that's fair.
What did you think of that cold opener of the character kind of running through the maze and getting brutally murdered in our opener to what the cube is? That
was like, if you want to set the scene, they nailed it.
reminded me of like the opener to every Game of Thrones book, and how there's a character that just immediately gets murdered in one way or another, and that's kind of the hook. And for this movie, it was the perfect hook to get us interested in and give us an idea of what we were to expect going into this movie. It's definitely the most brutal of kills in this film. And
so he just gets sliced and diced apart, basically.
Which actually is referenced later in Rick and Morty in an episode. Where yeah. And that's kind of a direct reference to that, actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
Enough.
I didn't connect that, but I definitely, like, when I saw that on Rick and Morty, I was like, oh, I know where that's from.
Yeah. Because you had seen this movie before.
Yeah, I watched it probably like early 2000s, and so like not right when it came out. I was only 6 then, no, 4. But so I watched it again. I was probably like 12, 13.
Yeah.
And it was pretty scary then. And like, I don't even know. It was so long ago. I only have like brief memories that I don't know if I watched the whole thing through.
Yeah. So after that, we're kind of introduced to our main cast, and each of them wakes up in their separate room. Over time, they kind of coalesce, come together, and the character of Ren, which I kind of briefly mentioned before, I really wanted to talk about him because in my mind, he was the most compelling character out of all of them. He had the most interesting backstory. He had a
nickname, like he was a French escape artist from. Like, he escaped 7 prisons.
Yeah.
And so he was like, this is nothing. Yeah. Like, I'll figure this out. Just all you have to do is keep your head down and keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And he comes up with like this whole plan about how they're going to check the room for traps by throwing the boots into the room to try to throw any sensors. He's sucking on the buttons to keep his saliva going. Like, he's definitely somebody who's been through these scenarios, these situations before, and been able to get out of tight places.
Like, he just has the mind for it.
Yes,
that's all he wants to do is be in this situation. So he's like
in his element.
Yeah, in his element.
And they straight up freaking kill him right off the bat.
And in a very brutal way as well. Like, he thinks it's all good. Like, he doesn't actually really have the system. He hasn't been in long enough, is from what we can tell. But he has this system, and he has like the building blocks to be this amazing lead character who's like he's kind of a bastard, and he's gonna be like, he'd be hard to deal with.
Yeah.
In this situation, but you would just follow him because he has that mind. He's known as the Ren for escaping prisons.
Yeah, and I like what they went for with this. Like, it is such a big twist that the most compelling character and the one who you think that you're going to be with throughout the movie, and that might be the twist, like evil character or something like that, is just killed off so brutally, so quickly. Yeah. I like what they went for. The only problem that I have with it is that it leaves a large hole in the group in terms of likability that I struggled coming back from that, because I instantly latched onto him as like the most compelling of all of them, and then just they ripped him away from me. I wanted to see more of the Ren.
And I think that was like so strategically done because of like the overall point of the movie, at least like the idea that they're portraying. It isn't like, this isn't like an action movie where you're gonna have that awesome guy to follow. Yeah. Like, it's not that type of movie.
Yeah, and that's what the directors were definitely going for. But it's that first like big shift that I wasn't necessarily prepared for, and good on them for like ripping the carpet out from under me on that. But the only thing that I will say to that is that I wish the other characters were written a little bit more compellingly, to make up for the gap that he leaves. The movie starts off with that, like you said, it starts off like with the ground running.
They didn't, like, what I love is they didn't have like each person going about their day before they get kidnapped or whatever.
It's a cold open.
Yeah, pure cold, like cold as fuck. It was good.
It was cold as ice.
an ice cube.
And they managed to really keep that tension for the first half of the movie, I would say. Like, the first half is one of the most tense films that I've seen in a long time, and especially this Halloween season. And I really was hooked on that first half, the premise, the characters, the tension, all of those came together really well. I think the movie kind of struggles a little bit in the middle with kind of where to go with each of the characters, because at this point in time we have a pretty good idea of how to avoid the traps. Obviously,
it's not like concrete, it's not perfect. They don't know it yet, I guess.
Yeah,
so yeah,
and they learn aspects of like how to solve the puzzle with the prime numbers, and that's when the math starts coming in, and that's where we see the math student who thinks she has nothing to offer the group really become a crucial part of the gang. Yeah,
like at the beginning, she's so like dejected. She doesn't feel like she can help anything. She's just wants to lay down and give up, kind of. And that's where actually Quentin is like, no, you got to keep going. Like,
yeah,
we got this. Like, we'll figure it out.
So here's the thing is, I think that I was supposed to maybe connect with her character the most as the movie progressed. And I think I liked her character. The problem that I had with her character was between the math solving and like the cool like aspects of that, she played like a kind of a bratty teenage girl at points. Like, some of her dialogue was a little bit cringe, to be honest.
and like that's where like her and like Worth is like the backboard for each of the other characters. Like out of the characters we have left, like it would have been interesting to keep Ren in there so that there was a mix, I guess. But like she is kind of flirting with Worth a little bit, or he's flirting with her, and she throws it back, and then after a while it kind of gets spoiled, and she stays like this bratty kid but she actually doesn't like him now.
I don't know. I don't know why directors think that having the bratty teenager in films is appealing. Like,
it was that time. I think it is a 1997 film.
Yeah, and it still continues. Like, there was a point in time on The Walking Dead when Carl was like the most hated character on The Walking Dead, right? And eventually they figured it out and they wrote him to a really compelling character. But I would say that I would connect those characters, and it's not like she was always like that, because I was really interested in like her solving the math problems and stuff like that. But it was just kind of between, and that's where I started noticing partway through the movie. I was like, I think this movie thinks that it has slightly better dialogue than it does.
Yeah. Like, there's certain jokes that are, like, don't land exactly. Like...
Yeah, and just, I'll kind of compare it to this. The artist Nickelback gets a really bad rap, and part of the reason why they get a really bad rap is because they make generic kind of songs. Like, there's songs about like starting a rebellion, but the whole song is just about starting a rebellion. Like, there's no purpose behind it, like, other than that. And so a lot of these characters kind of are like, have a little bit of like fight the man to them, but like, it doesn't feel like there's any more depth beyond what they're saying, really.
Yeah, and I think it kind of works, like, if you go really far into like what you think like the purpose, like the what's the like mission statement of this movie, what's it trying to make you think about,
right?
And I think it works because they're fucking stupid.
Well, and that's one interesting piece of this movie is each of the characters having their own theory as to why the cube exists and why they're in there. And there's some good debates around that. And this is where we get a very interesting plot point that Worth provides that I don't think I've ever seen in another movie before, is that Worth basically says there is no point. That we're just here, and that this is just some big bureaucratic tool that has been built, and there's so many moving parts to it and so many people involved in it that at some point in time it's lost all purpose and all meaning, and we're just here because it's been created, and whoever the designers of it were at this point just want to see it in action.
Yeah, and they're not even around, the people who originally created it, probably. Like, this is theory. So we should have started probably with, like, Holloway being, like, quite conspiratorial.
Yeah, she's a doctor, but she's very
She's like, it's all the same machine, right? The Pentagon, multinational corporations, the police. If you do one little job, you build a widget in Saskatoon, and the next thing you know, it's 2 miles under the desert, the essential component of a death machine. I was right all along. So she was always into conspiracies. So she actually asked, why put people in it? And Worth is like, because it's here. You have to use it, or you have to admit it's pointless. Mm-hmm. And then Quentin's like, but it is pointless. And then Worth is like, Quentin, that's my point. Oh, that was Quentin and Worth, not. Anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it explained, like his theory is the underlying idea of this whole movie, I think.
Yeah, that it's just kind of meaningless. And this is where I really started to struggle with the film is around this plot or this time, because this is where the film feels like it's starting to lose its way a little bit and lose not necessarily the tension. I think the tension holds up fairly well for the most part.
Yeah.
But that's when the dialogue, I started thinking, this movie thinks it has more compelling dialogue than it does. And I actually bounced off the idea of that. Like, it's really cool that they went for that.
Yeah.
But for me personally, being a corporate sellout that I am, I see this and I go, there's no way that somebody develops this thing without a purpose or a reason behind it. And in addition to that, the biggest point against that is that every character in the movie, in the group, has a very niche role to play. And if you don't think any one of them does, I will make an argument and a case for every single one of them.
No, I definitely see, like, that's what I was thinking about while watching this, was like comparing like who each person is and what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like because there's the human elements that are like a heavy focus in this, and there's like philosophical stuff. So I don't know, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I brought this up in another movie or discussion or not, but there's this short story called The Machine Stops. It was written in like 1895 or something like that.
Okay.
It is a thoroughly like harrowing short story of basically this concept of like a corporate world that has advanced so far that it doesn't know how to be human anymore.
Right.
And that's kind of where we're living in this cube. Like that's where Worth is, like, he knows he's just a cog in the machine and there's no point to the machine anymore.
Yeah, and that's where maybe I didn't connect with that as much, because it just felt too much like there is a purpose, and maybe we don't fully understand what the purpose is.
Did you ever at one moment think he is the creator and he's just in here to find out, like the classic trope?
That's a pretty classic trope. It never actually crossed my mind.
I remember it not being that way, but in the moment when it was revealed that he did work there, I was like, oh, he's just in here to, like, he's part of it, whatever.
Yeah,
but no,
and that actually leads to a very interesting discussion about how the movie ends, and I don't quite want to get there yet, because there's a couple plot points that I want to talk about as we kind of get through things. The next big plot point that I want to talk to you about is the switch from Quentin being our main protagonist to being our main antagonist.
Yeah. I
was left a little baffled by his decision to let Holloway the doctor fall. I just didn't feel like, I don't know if I just didn't feel like he had it in him, or if the build up to it wasn't enough for me to think like this guy is willing to let her drop. Just the way his character is portrayed is like, I need you all because all of you have a purpose here and all of you can help us get out. And the, like, I know they're under a lot of stress and a lot of tension, but right before that, they kind of have that back and forth where they're not in agreement of necessarily like how to push forward and keep everybody motivated. But
yes, I think that, well, so he's a cop.
Yeah.
You have to kind of consider his position in the world, especially potentially in like this future world that we don't have any insight into. But like a cop will do anything for his cop buddies.
Right.
But these people are civilians, and he's going to use them as boots for as long as he can. But if he doesn't need the boot anymore, he's going to throw it away, which happens.
Yeah. it felt like just a little too much of a leap for me at that point in time.
I got that because he was so. It was like he was strung out, like he was on coke or something.
Right.
Like he was like, all right, we got to keep going. Like we got grab whatever you have inside you and like use it to keep going. And then he just instantly ran out. He's like, nope, that's it. Like he ran out completely of his his humanity and his drive to keep going, something like that. Mm-hmm. So I kind of got it. I was a little shocked again that he did drop her, but like you could kind of see it in his eyes. Like once he did drop her, I was like, this was coming, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did snap at that point, and things take a very dark turn in his character from there. I don't want to talk too much about a lot of the rest of the plot details. Let's actually talk, before I get to the big ending, let's talk about the math behind everything.
Okay.
How did you feel about the use of math within the traps throughout the movie?
So there weren't enough traps, I don't think, but like
that's just
so I wish we got to see a little bit more of them, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, like that, it doesn't really bother me that much. But with the math, they did it well enough that it, like, to someone like the main audience who doesn't really know math well,
right,
they portrayed it very well. To math people, they might be frustrated, but they actually like literally did consult mathematicians for this.
Yes, and I'm really excited to talk about the math behind things. But in terms of a plot device itself, I was following the prime numbers, and I thought that was really interesting and compelling. I think as somebody who does appreciate math, I started to get a little bit lost towards the end. Like, I think they took like a really big leap of like how difficult the math became. Mm-hmm. And I did a lot of research into
Astronomical.
The prime permutations or the prime factors.
Factorials, yeah.
And that's actually a really complicated math, not theory, but like concept
to understand.
And so when I was watching the film, that last bit when they started to get into the more complex stuff, that started to actually lose me a little bit because I wasn't following things as much as I had been before. And so I kind of I almost wish they had kept things like not as complex as they did. I understand from a plot aspect because that's when Kazan becomes really important and we learn about how he's a savant and understands things so deeply. And
he's a computer.
He's essentially
human
a
computer Rain Man pull like the twist.
And that twist was done actually relatively well. I did like that, but there is something about like in a movie, I want to understand the mystery, and by the end, I want to like have understood the mystery and followed everything through. And I think I got lost maybe in the details of the math a little bit.
Like get the like Cartesian coordinates and stuff like that, like how she switched from prime numbers to this is Cartesian. Like you're like I have to put this on an axis. And
that stuff I didn't follow that as well either. Like I understood that maybe there's a way to do that and calculate that, but it was so complicated, and because things are moving again kind of at a reasonable pace again at that point in time, that like I didn't have time to think about it enough. And then we get to the end, and I think that this is going to be maybe a bit of a polarizing ending for some audiences, because the way the film ends is almost somewhat ambiguous.
It is.
The only character to survive is Kazan, who makes it out of the cube, and Kazan makes it out, and then it ends like cut.
They cut Quentin in half too. Without showing it, which was cool. But
the way that the whole like end part went down was really exciting, but I was left wanting more. And I don't know if that was in a good way. Like I don't know if I was happy about the conclusion. I don't know if it was satisfying enough. And
so 3 of them at least could have survived that. They could, like, the only reason that Worth and Levin died was because Worth was like, well, there's the exit. This is stupid. And then he just sits down. And then so that wastes the precious time that they have to just walk outside.
So I'm actually not even necessarily upset about that. Like I'm okay with the character of Kazan being the only one to escape.
Yeah.
The only So here's the problem that I have with this point in time in the film, and at this point you may be understanding like where my review of this is probably going.
Understanding. That's a new one.
I'll probably have 6 more by the end of this one. But so here's what I want in a satisfying conclusion to a film that has a lot of mysterious elements to it is like I want some answers to the mystery. You don't have to give me everything. Like, just a little bit of closure. And with the way things ended so coldly, if you can end a movie with some ambiguity, if you leave the audience with a little bit to think about and to like
like the question should be like, does he or doesn't he, like, well, it kind of, does he or doesn't he survive? Is he or isn't he out?
Right.
So they
but
did
what's
leave you
outside
with
of
that.
the cube and like what's actually going on? Like just a little kernel would have been nice too.
Yeah, like
So here's my proposed ending, because I did a lot of thinking about this. Is I actually think there's one of 2 ways that I could see it going, and there was a third that you kind of mentioned before that I wanted to bring back. Is one I could see. I really like the fact that Kazan comes out, because let's say that this is a military operation and Kazan is the only character to come out, and the military wanting to research and do whatever whatever research they're doing can't even communicate with this guy because he's so mentally frail, and the trauma of everything that he'd been through, there's no way he'd be able to give them anything. And I think that would have been a really cool ending to see, is just the people running it. Alternatively, what I could see is more proof of Worth's theory that there's really no.
That's where I was
gonna
say. I was gonna say, I just like, if all they did was have like some kind of transition where like he exits and then just like one more email gets added to on an office computer in a beige office. Like it's just like they have 3,562 emails, and then there's just like one little boop.
Yeah.
And that's it. And like they're like, then you think like there's 3,000 other or like they could pick a number like 666 or something there's other ones like it, and just like everybody's in there, or they're in an office, something like that maybe. I don't know.
Just a little bit to make you think at the end of the film. Like I think there's a few different directions you could have taken.
They did have something for that ending. They wrote it and shot it and everything. That was the first thing they cut.
Yeah.
But maybe they just didn't have that like exact one, and it wasn't good the way they described it, and it ended flat or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually something that when we get into effects and filming here that I read as well, and I couldn't find like the director stating what the alternative ending was specifically, but I was really interested to know what that original idea was, and that why it got cut so quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right. Like maybe it wasn't as compelling of an idea as what you and I have come up with since.
I feel like I could go into so many theories with this. What I do love about this movie is the concept and the world. Like there is some world building, not really outside. It's just within the minds of like these people and their society. Kind of like it makes you think.
Yeah, it does. And my favorite aspects of the film are the tension and the setting itself. Not only is the idea of a labyrinth of cubes really compelling, filled with traps,
and they're moving as you find out eventually.
Exactly. But the aesthetic of it is beautiful. Like it's really cool, and the way that they take the different colored rooms and utilize those, and they even utilize them a little bit in the storytelling as well. Like each room, the way things shake out plot-wise is actually a little bit relevant to what room they're going through. A lot of the dialogue-heavy rooms were actually in red, and some of the other moments are in some of the other colors. So let's move into effects and filming, maybe. So, like you kind of said, there's the cut with the end part of the film. But if we back up to the original draft of what Cube was originally meant to be, is it had a more comedic tone. They were thinking about using a little bit more surreal imagery. They were planning on having a cannibal subplot in the film.
That would make sense. I thought about that at a certain point because
Yeah.
they don't have water, they don't have food.
Yeah, exactly. How
Cannibalism.
else are you going to survive? And especially if a character like Quentin is pushed to the edge.
Yeah.
How long of a jump is it from dropping a woman who is maybe one of your ways to salvation to starting to eat some of your fellow inmates?
Yeah.
They also at one point thought of the idea of edible moss growing on the walls so that the characters could eat, but they decided to take that out to make it more urgent that they escape.
Yeah. I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't like bones, like old dead people. Like they find one room with like 5 people in it just like them, and they're like, oh fuck, this has been going on for like decades.
And the final like aspect that didn't get added to the movie was they had an idea of having a monster roaming the cube. I don't know if that was necessarily needed because the idea of having the characters turn on each other was probably compelling enough.
Yeah.
The film itself, like we talked about, is a Canadian film. The special effects, like this is a very, very small budget film, like under $1 million significantly. And that's $1 million Canadian, so well under $1 million US. And part of the reason why the budget was kept so small is because there was a special effects company called Core that decided to actually do the digital effects for free for them.
I did
in support
see
of
that.
the Toronto film industry.
Yeah.
So they got a pretty good deal, and the effects are actually pretty well done for the most part.
Yeah. Is for that time and that budget, very well done.
Yeah, like this is that time period where CGI is not great, and there's a lot of films using the CGI crutch to make compelling scenes, like some of the scenes that we saw in there. But their use of the effects that they did use were really well done. I really enjoyed that aspect of the film as well. So let's talk the math a little bit. So the consultant that they used was the mathematician David Pravica, who was brought on as math consultant. So they talk about this in the movie, how there's over 17,000 cubicle rooms within the larger cube labyrinth. And I did the math on this afterwards because I was like, wow, that's a big number. And if you actually do the math on a cube that is 26 cubes tall by 26 cubes wide by 26 cubes in length, you actually do come to 17,000, which is, it's really mind-boggling to think about that many rooms in this maze. But when you go from one side to the other in 26 rooms,
it's kind of small.
Yeah,
like it's not that. Yeah, because it seemed like they're like maybe a 10 by 10 by 10 room.
Yeah, exactly. They're
12 by 12 by 12 might be
about 5 meters, 15 feet, just under 5 meters in size each room. So the whole shell would have been about 130 meters, 434 feet.
So that's not even that. Yeah, like it's not like it's kilometers, but but the way everything's moving inside means that you're traveling for like a long time.
Yeah, and if you end up in a room that does move while you're in it, you're completely resetting where you think you are within the cube, right? And that's where like explaining the coordinates of the rooms, I don't think I can do it. I don't know if you could even explain them, but that's one of those things that like
that you have to suspend disbelief there because it's
there was a way about doing it. Like the way that they do it is actually legit. It's based on what their math consultant provided them with. It's just for the layman, it's really hard to understand and follow. And there was even a way to calculate it. Like he had actually built in a way to calculate where the room was in relation to where they were at the time they were in the cube. Like because everything moving actually like mathematically did work. Like it's kind of mind-boggling that somebody came up with this.
I really don't see how, like, basically with math, my understanding is like a lot, like half the time when you're like coming up with something new, you're picking an outcome that you want to happen and then proving it. And if that does show you something, then like you have to extrapolate that meaning. So I think his math kind of made sense, but there's no point to it. And that is like, it's not like a Rubik's cube. It's not a 17,000 square Rubik's cube, which like even then, like you can do the math on Rubik's cubes and everything. They've done, like, everybody who does them knows it kind of.
Yeah.
But just trying to grasp that on that scale. I don't know like why it made sense. I don't understand why it made sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I agree.
They only saw, I don't know, like 50 rooms if we're
Yeah, we probably
extrapolating.
saw like a half of that, like or
Yeah, well, yeah, like we don't see every room that they go
Yeah.
into, but how did it make sense that they moved back? They would have had to go through so many permutations that it doesn't make sense.
it's really hard to follow, and that's one of those things where you kind of do just have to trust that the movie knows better than you, and that's maybe where as an audience, as a general audience goer, like that.
That's easy to do. You
Yeah.
could just imagine.
Yeah.
Like you just let that happen.
For me, like I struggled with it a little bit more,
Yeah.
but that's just the way that I am in my.
And we're
in
like
my viewing
dissecting a
experience.
movie a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I love the way that they built the set for this, because they
Yeah.
really only had one cube that everybody was in the whole time.
And they just lit it differently.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so they used like sliding panels to light the different rooms, and they actually it was a big time commitment to actually change all the colors on the cube.
Oh,
So they actually filmed, the way they filmed it was by different colors. So they started with all of the red rooms, which are all the dialogue heavy rooms. So the actors actually didn't struggled a little bit with that because
They don't know where they are in their like emotions and everything yet.
well, yeah, a little bit that, but also there's something about being in those red rooms too,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being like that color kind of messes with your mind a little
Yeah.
bit.
And like if you're slightly claustrophobic and then you add in that color element.
And how many hours they spent in those
Yeah.
rooms doing those dialogue, like the heavy dialogue stuff. So they were very happy to move into like the white room scenes in contrast to that. Last piece, like the way that they actually presented the other rooms was they had one partial cube that was basically just like almost one panel. And so wherever your perspective was, like if you were in the new room looking back at them, we would see the panel behind them essentially. It's really
Yeah, yeah.
well done
Yeah.
micro budget filmmaking. I
Yeah.
really appreciated
Yeah.
those aspects of it.
And that's where like that is not something that anybody's going to complain about, like inconsistencies in the set. Like that was
No.
it was a perfect set for this movie. Like they nailed that.
Yeah, and just even like the look of it was really well done. Like
And like you feel the like claustrophobia a little bit like as the scenes
yeah,
are
because
going.
it's filmed
Yeah.
within like the square itself,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and you feel like you're there the way it's filmed. Like and those rooms really don't feel large for the most part. There's some framing devices that they use that almost make some of the rooms feel bigger than others, but at the end of the day, like when you see all 5 characters of our main group together in the room, like you can tell that there's not a lot of space between anybody. And that would definitely play with people's emotions as well, both like on set but also in the plot of the film.
Yeah.
I actually I had one other thing that I want to talk about for effects and filming is it's actually the first draft of the script. I should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about this. So all of the characters originally had the backstory of being an accountant in the first draft of the script. And I say bring back the accountant version, damn it.
Oh, that would be funny.
I think that's where it would have been that more like comedic tone of all the accountants, because all of them would have been trying to figure out this math problem together. They all would have had like, they wouldn't have been funny themselves, like but just
the
watching them
situational and like reactions and things, because it's almost like I forget, there's like a thought experiment, how many monkeys does it take, like if you have infinite monkeys and infinite typewriters, one of them will eventually get the will write like a Shakespeare sonnet, or the whole Shakespeare works or whatever, if they're just mashing keys. It's almost like that if you think about like having just accountants. So then that kind of would create this whole world where there's accountants that worked who helped create it, like Worth, just office workers, and then there's the people inside. So it's kind of like a cycle. Everybody's an accountant. That would be hilarious.
Yeah, I think it would actually be really funny. I like what they did in the end with all the characters having a very relevant component to why they're there or why their skills are necessary for the group to succeed. However, I found that aspect was in conflict with the idea that the cube was meaningless.
Yeah.
And that's maybe where I had that conflicting argument in my head, is I wanted to like one or the other, but I couldn't like both of them together.
That's where like the philosophical side of this is what I think helped create this like cult phenomenon around this movie, because you can like think of so many different layers to like absurdism and existentialism, things like that, because my mind is constantly running whenever I like, since I've watched this, thinking about like, oh, what if the cube, like what if they're all dead and they're all questioning what happens after life,
Right.
and they're like, and Worth is like, it's pointless, there's nothing, and like Quentin's trying to hold on to his family, but they're not there. So like, yeah, there's so many layers that like your mind is going to create on top of this.
Yeah, like, and maybe that's where the ambiguity does a service to the film, is that you can think of those other aspects.
So Kazan is Jesus, and I'm just
Who's Buddha?
well, he's the white light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk score really briefly. I don't think you and I had a whole lot to talk about here.
Just the sound effects, more so than score, were well done.
It was very atmospheric. It helped with the feeling of the tension throughout the film. Like I was very tense throughout the film.
Yeah.
The one small note that I wanted to make was actually that the set was actually very close to a train line, so they actually incorporated the noise of the trains going by was actually the sound of the cubes moving.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it was really really good use of their surroundings there. Let's talk the legacy of the film. The film was kind of a bit of a failure in Canada, to be honest, when it first came out.
I felt that when I watched it.
Yeah, and part of the reason for that was just the marketing was not successful in Canada. Like the studio didn't really market it very well.
Yeah. I read that.
But it actually found its footing in other audiences.
Of the world.
Yeah, so which is really cool. Like for example, in France, in 1997, it was the second highest grossing summer film in France the year it came out. Very, very popular over
like
there.
One producer, like one guy at the film companies in France was just like, this is actually really good.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, he marketed it, I think, himself. Like he brought it there and marketed it, released it kind of himself. Sort of. I don't know exactly the business side of that, but
yeah, and then in the Japanese market, it became the top video rental in the 90s.
Yeah.
And the reason why it was thought of to become so popular is one of the writers, Graham Manson, actually had the idea that Japanese people have an understanding of living in very confined spaces. Like if you think about the Japanese Tokyo lifestyle specifically, that it might resonate better with the Japanese audiences who really like understand maybe some of the metaphors that the film is trying to convey about people trapped together in these tight situations.
And I know it's not Japanese, but the Parasite, that has some connections, I think, like the similar mentality.
Yeah,
and understanding, yeah.
And that's kind of where I think that if the film had maybe gone even more of a route towards classism and talking about that, because there's so many little straws that I almost wish the film grasped at that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like the platform does a really good job about having a social commentary and talking about classism, and same with Parasite. And I think that was almost there with this one, but not quite.
Yeah. It seemed like almost everybody was similar class except for like Kazan. Like they were all fairly successful, like middle road or like middle class people. Like the doctor, she might not,
but she didn't agree with like the cop and what he was doing, and the cop didn't feel like she was grateful for his role in society.
Yeah, exactly.
and all of those aspects as well. But at this point now, so pretty popular movie in Japan, pretty popular movie in France, eventually developed a cult following, maybe even internationally, and we're gonna see as we get into our sequels, prequels, and reboots that there are a number of films that actually come out of this first film to very varying reception.
That's fair.
Which we'll talk about later. I actually want to talk about my personal review and the partner factor before I talk about some of those. And I have a reason for that, but we'll get to that after. Do you want to start with your review first?
Yeah, it's a complicated one, this one. I think it's good. I understand the cult following. Like, I appreciate what's good about it. I don't like certain things, but they're not that bad compared to, like, other movies where I'm, like, screaming at the TV screen.
Yeah.
Like, I was never, like, angry at, I was never gonna turn this off just because they made, like, one little mistake or anything. Like, the dialogue was a little bit campy. Like, it was a little plain. Like, things were ham-fisted. And I think that's where, like, if they just had a little bit bigger of a budget, more time, like, maybe they, like, originally made it at a different point in their, like, in the direct, then, like, maybe the writing would have been better. But, like, for what it is, it's solid good.
Yeah,
it's good. That's like, it averages to good, I think, is what I have to say.
Okay, and so here's where I'm very similar to you. Like, there's a lot that I really grabbed onto. Like, I started off really high on this film, and my opinion actually changed as I watched it. Like, the first 30 minutes of this are excellent. The tension is so great. That cold opener with seeing nothing prior to the cube and the crazy death scene of that first character and the opening moments. There's so much. Even the premise is fantastic. It's such a great idea. And then partway through, like, I don't know where exactly, it just started to feel like it was running out of steam for me. And I think that where I landed on it is, I think that this would have worked out better if it was a bit tighter and it was maybe in more of like a Black Mirror anthology series where it was like 45 to an hour long. I think you could cut this down a little bit more and make it very, very tight. And so for me, as a feature-length film, it felt a little too stretched. So here's the thing, is I don't know if I can give this a strong recommendation or that I really enjoyed it. But on the flip side, I don't think that I can criticize fans of the film, because I think that there's enough components of this that I think there's some people who are really going to love this. And in fact, on that note, Mike obviously isn't here to record this episode with us, but he did end up watching the movie before we recorded this, and he actually really, really liked the film overall. He said that he really liked the twist of Quentin becoming our hero to the bad guy in the film. He really, really liked the character of Worth, and he has a bit of a redemption arc as kind of the character who's so pessimistic that he doesn't even care to help the group kind of thing. He really liked the ambiguity throughout the film, how we never really understand what's going on, or even how the movie ends, like how we don't get answers. So I think that there are going to be certain people that really enjoy all of these pieces, and so it's going to be maybe divisive, but at the same time, like, I couldn't knock anybody for enjoying this, because I saw the aspects of the film that I enjoyed, and not everything was for me, and that's okay. Not every film has to be specifically for me.
Like, if you can ignore certain things and really enjoy yourself, or you can hone in on certain things and not like it.
Well, and certain things detracted from the movie for me, and to Mike, it was actually a benefit to his watching and his experience. So this is maybe the most subjective movie we've ever done on the podcast. Like, I think you're either gonna love it or be pretty lukewarm on it. So it's kind of an interesting one. Now, here's the other thing.
It would be hard to hate.
Yeah.
So I want to say that, like, if Mike was here, we might be able to get him convinced that he doesn't love it. Like, he would probably say, like, I loved so many things about it, but like, it can't be. It's not like a 9 or 10 or something like that.
No, and I don't think he would have given that either. But
like, for what it is,
you can really enjoy a movie without having to think it's good. Like, for example, this is a very common one, is the movie Roadhouse is not a good movie. But it is so fun. It is one of the most entertaining films that you can watch.
See, that's the thing, because this doesn't have that exact thing. Like, Yeah.
The only other thing that I want to say before we kind of get out of our personal reviews is I do want to consider that you and I might be a little bit biased on this one, because I was thinking about this as well, and let's look at the list of movies that I've recently watched.
Yeah.
I've watched The Titanic, I've watched Network, I rewatched The Conjuring recently, some of those other big classic horror films, and this movie is going to hold a candle to it, and that's okay because the budget couldn't even, like, this budget is so small, you couldn't even pay one of the main characters in any of those movies.
Technically, if you were to like average how good it was to how much the budget was, this is over the top amazing.
Yeah, like and you know what? If you're a fan of micro budget films, you're gonna absolutely love this one. Like,
oh man,
Paranormal Activity or something like that. Yeah. Like,
we have to watch Primer.
Yeah, that's on the list. Okay. I added it to our list.
Okay, good. Because again, like micro budget movies, that takes the cake. If this movie had those writers, that would have been amazing.
Is that a Cronenberg?
No.
Oh, okay. I did add it to our list though, for sure.
Okay.
I was looking at that maybe even today.
This is like two guys that made a time travel movie in like, I think the budget was like $17,000.
Cool.
So I'm just going to go through, again, the names. Like, names have been always pretty, like, cool for me, and, like, why people are named certain things in film. But you found more information on this because you knew that I would like it. So, and I was trying to find it, but I didn't find, like, an exact rundown. But yours is pretty solid, so I'm going to go through that a little bit. So everybody is named after a prison in this. Levin and Worth combined to create the federal prison in the U.S., Leavenworth Prison, which has a rigid set of rules and corporately built and owned. So that is kind of like, it makes sense why the characters were the way they were a little bit when compared to that prison. And then Rennes is named after Rennes prison, or Centre Penitentiaire Rennes, which is the only woman prison in France. It's a pioneer in prison policies. So I guess like he is kind of like a pioneer in figuring out how to escape. Exactly. So they had to create all these policies, potentially.
Yeah.
Something like that. Quentin is obviously San Quentin State Prison in California, which is very brutal. And Holloway could be in reference to Her Majesty Prisons Holloway in England. Again, a woman-only prison, largest in the UK. And then Kazan is a famous Russian prison known for like mental illness.
Yeah.
Or is it a mental illness prison?
I don't know. I don't know if I saw.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard to find information about Kazan prison a little bit. I think the connections are loosely there. It wasn't like, I think they may have picked like some of the top prisons, and then they're like, oh, how does this fit each character? Like, how can I fit these characters to the prison names? I don't think it was like super central and super thought out, but it kind of was.
Yeah, it's enough interesting backstory to the idea behind the characters, and as the director of the film, you can maybe give that backstory to the character. Like, this is what we've based your character off of. If you're interested in going back and kind of reading the history behind this, you'll kind of maybe get an understanding of why I named you after that prison. So we've gone through all of our reviews. I saved sequels, prequels, and reboots to the end because, as I kind of mentioned to you before, I did a little bit of extracurricular work on this episode. So the idea behind the original movie Cube is actually from The Twilight Zone. And specifically, there's a episode called 5 Characters in Search of an Exit that came out in 1961. And so I was reading about that, and I ended up finding it online. An episode
no way.
And it was like 26 minutes. So I was like, I got time. I'll watch it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I've
tried to get in, like, I've tried to find somewhere to watch like all of the Twilight Zone. Did you find somewhere or just YouTube or what?
I just found it like streaming online.
Okay.
Yeah. No, the Twilight Zone isn't streaming anywhere currently, unfortunately. So yeah, you'll just have to find online. It's an old TV series. You're gonna find the episodes that you want probably relatively easily. It was really an interesting concept. As I said, there were 5 characters. The main character was a military general, and then we had a clown, a ballerina, a hobo, and a musician. And so the musician or the military general wakes up and basically like a cylinder. And so all of these people have been stuck in this cylinder for who knows how long. None of them remembers their name, anything like behind them, their backstory, anything at all.
Okay.
It's way more comedic than Cube, and part of it's just the way that the clown portrays his character. I really, really liked that portrayal of the clown.
Interesting.
And so everybody in this cylinder is kind of given up, even though they can see above them that there's an exit. They just can't get to it because of how high up it is.
Yeah.
So the general comes up with a plan to get out. And I almost don't want to spoil the ending necessarily, because the ending is very Black Mirror-esque almost to it. It's even more of a twist than Black Mirror, because Black Mirror is usually like a social commentary kind of ending, whereas this one's like a very sci-fi kind of twist.
Nice.
I really, really enjoyed it. I'm debating whether or not I should spoil it on here. It's like 60 years old at this point, so...
Yeah, but nobody's... Like, this... We could make a whole podcast, I bet, just about the Twilight Zone and why people should watch it.
Yeah,
once we start watching it. Yeah.
Man, I love sci-fi.
Yeah,
and
me
so
too.
I would absolutely dig that. But maybe I'll leave it open-ended. I'll say that it's definitely worth your time. It's only 26 minutes. It tells a very closed story, and it's very well done. I really enjoyed the twist at the end. I might tell you about it after if you're not going to watch it, but I won't say any more than that. So I watched that, and then I was reading about the sequels to the Cube movie. So there are 2 sequels to the movie. There's Cube 2 Hypercube, which followed a couple years after, and then the last in the original series was called Cube Zero, which is actually a prequel to the original Cube. And then after that, actually in 2020 or 2021, there's a Cube remake out in Japan, which got very bad reviews.
I think this would make a good show.
I don't know if I agree. I think that it makes a good anthology episode, like the Twilight Zone or Black Mirror.
Yeah.
But as we were talking about before, I watch a lot of movies in October, and I am a big fan of horror movies. And even though I didn't love the original Cube, there's something in me that just wanted to watch more. So I watched Cube 2 Hypercube, and I think I liked it better than the first movie.
Wow.
It has a terrible rating online.
Yeah.
It's got like a 5.6 rating online. It's got very different flaws than the first movie. So I would say Cube is like, it's a very self-contained horror sci-fi, whereas Cube 2 Hypercube is a sci-fi thriller. There's still some horror elements to it. It's like I said, it has its issues. This movie really flounders in the middle. Like there's a 20-minute point in the movie that I could cut out and it would not have changed the plot at all. And it has terrible CGI. Like,
it would
bad.
be at that time.
So
that makes sense.
Bad. It looked, and as well, it looks awful compared to the first movie. The first movie, the aesthetic was one of my favorite things. The different color rooms. Cube 2 is all in white rooms, and this like bright, like hospital lighting kind of thing. It looks, like I said, it just looks bad. But I thought the story and the dialogue was more interesting. The story of Cube 2 is that they've created a new cube, and the new cube is actually a cube that they've basically created in time and space. And so rooms move around more differently. Like, so there's very at the beginning of the cube, there's a character who opens a door, and like the one guy like tries to go after him, and then he closes the door, and then he's behind them in the other door, and then he's above them, and there's moments like that. There's moments where time moves differently within the cube, and the traps are much more intricate. And like I said, the dialogue was more interesting between the characters, and I'm a big sucker for sci-fi, and this was like guilty pleasure sci-fi. Overall, do I think it's like a great movie? No, but I enjoyed the sci-fi enough, and I recognized that it's not a great movie, but I enjoyed the sci-fi elements so much.
So that's more like Roadhouse.
Yes. And the ending, I I really enjoyed the ending as well. It ends outside of the cube with a much more cut and dry ending than the first one.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed it.
I would check that out. Yeah, it sounds good then.
I read online some of the reviews afterwards, and people hated this, and for a lot of the reasons that I kind of mentioned, like the stuff that is bad about the movie, the
Like the
flaws in the
CGI
film.
and
Yeah, exactly. And other people just kind of thinking that the movie kind of goes against the spirit of the original, and it does in a way, but for me, it appealed to my senses a little bit more, and I'll probably randomly end up watching Cube 2 at some point again because I like the junk sci-fi in it. Like, it's junk food. It's junk food sci-fi. It's something that I know I shouldn't be watching, that I don't need it, but I have to watch it anyway. So that's my review of Cube 2. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
And then I watched Cube 0, and it was horrible.
In every respect?
In every respect. It's, again, a very different tone than Cube and Cube 2, whereas it feels like a drama that's very gory. So Cube 2 actually spends the first half of the movie outside of the cube. And
wow.
It's two people who are tasked with...
2 or 3?
2. It's two people.
You're talking. Sorry, Cube 2 or Cube 3?
Cube 3.
Yeah, okay, because you said Cube 2.
Oh.
Okay, so Cube 0.
Cube 0
starts outside.
Yes, it starts outside the cube with 2 individuals who are tasked with keeping track of the people who are in the cube, and it fills in a lot of the backstory behind that.
Yeah,
it's very campy almost, but not quite campy, because there's an appeal to camp that I enjoy just as much as the next person.
Yeah,
but I almost, maybe it's more schlocky than campy. Like, it feels like cheaply made, and it feels like the dialogue just didn't hit as well. It explains a lot, and I think that if you're a big fan of the first and the ambiguity of the first, you're going to really hate the explanations for the cube and why because it explains everything. Like,
you don't want that.
It goes into why they designed the cube a little bit, not pretty ambiguous on that, but they go into like what happens if you make it out of the cube. It goes into like how you get in the cube and all of these different elements.
So I'm never gonna watch this then. How do you get out? Like, what was their explanation for, like, what happens when you get out?
They basically, you end up in a room where they chain you, and then they ask you a couple of questions. They ask you if you remember your full name, which the person in it didn't, and then they asked you if you believe in God. And it was a yes or no answer. And basically, he said, no, how can I after this experience? And so he clicks the button that says no, and they burn him alive. And then so the other character, the one character looks at the other character and says, how can you do this? He's like, do you even know what the yes button does? And the guy goes, no. And he goes, how have you never thought to press it before? And the guy said, well, nobody's ever said yes to that question before. And it's just like so lame.
Yeah.
It just, every aspect of it, I was like, this is just so like not for me. It was just so poorly made.
Yeah.
And like I said, like, the appeal of the cube is that that cold opening of us being stuck in there, and
you're trying to
anything.
think about, like, you have this image in your head that's getting built over the course of the movie, and then you kind of keep expanding it and enjoying that process more.
Yeah.
I think that's why we would like it, and maybe like someone like Kelvin might not, because he might not be into like that world building on his own kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how did people end up in the cube in this explanation? Because I don't think it's canon at this point. I don't want to believe it.
They're basically just like prisoners. Like, it's just
prisoners.
It's a big experiment for. So part of the cube 2 is that we learn that everybody in the hypercube has a connection to either the government or a weapons manufacturer, so that's it. That's all the information you know about it. It's kept very ambiguous as well.
Ambiguous.
And and I really enjoyed that aspect because it was enough of an explanation to keep me like interested, but not too much exposition to like the Cube 0 one did. And we find out that like everybody's there for like as a prisoner. Basically, you either decide whether A, you want the death penalty, or B, you want to go into the cube, and you're not given any more information than that. So here's the thing with Cube Zero, is it's basically the platform done horribly. Like, completely skip Cube Zero and watch the platform instead if you have any interest in it at all, because the Cube Zero was kind of like the original formulation of a lot of the ideas that the platform has, and they were not executed well, and I did not like Cube Zero at all. It was so bad.
Doesn't sound like it's worth even. They should just scrap it, probably.
I don't know, like it really wasn't for me. And it was really weird, like reading some of the reviews online. It's very divisive in the sense that like some people were like, oh, this feels like more of a return to the ideas of the first cube, because some people really hated the explanations in the second cube.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that in the second cube, and so it's really tough. I don't know. I like sometimes. Again, this is where it comes back to like we don't need every explanation all the time, and sometimes the explanations actually make things worse. Things worse, and this is definitely the case where everything is worse because of Cube Zero.
Yeah. I think it could be a series, and like kind of like the like in those chapters in The Stand, in like Stephen King's The Stand, where you just see random people's experience in the situation. Like I want to see like different episodes where there are completely different groups of people and they experience different things. Like I think they can make, let's say it is just an experiment, or I don't know what they could do exactly, but I could see like each episode being a different set of people.
Yeah. Well, and that's
or spread it out and have like following like let's say 6 groups of people, and you kind of follow their stories along and see what happens.
Well, and that's where Cube Zero actually does attempt to go. However, I think the purpose behind that is more the fact that Cube Zero is just trying to throw as many ideas at the wall as possible and seeing what sticks, versus really like going after like a story. Like there's just so many elements to it. Like at one point one of the characters says, well, you know, you people who are watching it, like one of the like higher ups is like, you're part of the experiment too, and we're seeing how you react to all of this. And there's so many little throw out stuff there. It's like they're just literally trying to seeing what sticks basically. And it's nothing. The answer was nothing stuck. I really hated Cube Zero.
That's funny.
But I'm a weirdo, and I'm like one of the only people that liked Cube 2. So that's I think that's it for
the Cube.
That's Cube.
Cube.
Yeah. I kind of wish Mike was here to defend it a little bit more than you and I did, but oh well, just not for me. So upcoming.
I did really like Ren, and like he's like his line and then his death was awesome.
It was great, and unfortunately a little frustrating for me at the same time, because I said, there wasn't enough compelling characters following that to carry the rest of the story.
Yeah, like, and like some of the jokes and stuff just kind of sucked.
Yeah, like this is the thing, is I want one satisfying component to a movie. I want either compelling dialogue, I want a mystery that's interesting, but by the end felt solvable for me, and that's something that I can go back to and be like, okay, I'm seeing how all of the pieces fall into place here. I want a good non-ambiguous, like I just wish that it hit one of those aspects, right? Like, and it just didn't hit any of them enough. That
it was like a shallow ambiguity, and you wanted like a deeper ambiguity if there is going to be any ambiguity. Ambiguity.
Man, saying that word as much as we have this episode, it's lost all like meaning.
It's become ambiguous.
It's become ambiguous itself. Are we in the cube right now?
I think we are.
All right. Well, if you don't hear from us by the next episode, then we probably killed each other within the cube.
Yeah. I might be the one who survives.
Sure. And even Cube Zero even explains why Kazan was mentally disabled, and
it like gives him like he got hit in the head or something, and then
it's just like he was actually intelligent before in the military or whoever took away. Yeah, they like brain scrambled him so that
that is brutal.
Yeah, so that he couldn't fully solve himself. Because that's how the Cube Zero ends. Spoilers. Nobody, unless you like love Cube and you want to watch
You
this.
might be spoiling this for Mike, so
Yeah.
tell him not to listen to that. But.
Well, I'm saying spoilers right now, but and you said you weren't going to watch it yourself, so that's why we spoiled it. But it ends with the character who was observing everyone, who actually goes into the cube to try to save the people in there. It ends with them basically scrambling his brain and sending them in there. And then he says the dialogue that Kazan says of like, oh, we're in the green room and I like the blue room. We should go back to the blue room. And then he starts like pounding his head off the wall. And so it's like that. And so it's like, it's just like one more explanation that I didn't need.
Yeah.
It's and that's hard. I understand that's hard in filmmaking to decide what do the audience need and what does the audience not need. But in the case of Cube Zero, it's the timeline in which they chose everything wrong.
Okay, yeah. That's hilarious. Okay, let's finish this.
Yeah, so upcoming, the next episode is going to be a war movie, and I think Mike and I are going to tackle the movie Platoon, which I'm very excited about. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed our episode. And
maybe we'll be back. Maybe we won't.
Yeah, we could really upset some Cube cult followers. And again, I can't fault you for enjoying this movie. I just did myself. So thanks, and we'll see you next time for Platoon, which I'm really excited about. And I said it really weird.
Yeah, Platoon.
Platoon. I hope you like platoons.
Okay, bye.